Oh my God, I just got off the phone with my brother. I know I just said in my last post, we laughed, we cried. I am so unbelievably proud of him.
So just happy. A boost of love to get you through the rest of it.
Yep.
Group hug. Group hug. Group hug.
He did so incredible in the jungle. Thank you to everybody that voted for him and helped make this journey so special for him and for all of us. I think that it is the best thing he could have done for himself right now. He made so many good friends, just hearing all the stories.
So when Jack finally saw his family walking into the jungle clearing, his wife Eri and one of his young daughters, the strength he'd been clinging to finally gave way.
You know, just waiting for you.
Yeah.
No, you're doing so good.
And hearing about everything they didn't show on the show and how lovely everybody was, I honestly don't know who I would want to win now.
His face crumpled, his shoulders folded, and he let out the kind of heartbreakingly raw sobs that only come from weeks of holding everything in. It was a reunion that felt more like a rescue. For days, fans had been worried about him. Ever since he tearfully admitted around the campfire that he had been struggling, that his father's death was still very fresh, that he hadn't fully processed the loss because life had moved too fast, viewers sensed he was emotionally running on fumes. Even his campmates noticed how quiet he became at night, staring into the flames, lost in memories of a world that no longer existed. The jungle strips people down. No phones, no distractions, no escape from your own thoughts. And for Jack, that meant confronting the empty space his father left behind. It meant waking up in the morning and realizing he couldn't text Ozzy a joke, couldn't send a picture from camp, couldn't share his triumphs or frustrations. It meant reliving the shock of losing him again and again.
What?
Every time the silence got too loud. Viewers already knew how deeply his father's death had affected him. When Ozzy passed away in July at 76, Jack had poured out his soul in a public tribute, describing his dad as a titan, a warrior, and a man whose love shaped every part of who he became. He wrote about their complicated childhood, the madness of fame, the laughter, the chaos, and the deep, private closeness that grew between them with age. He wrote about watching Ozzy perform one final time in Birmingham just weeks before he died. A moment Jack now understood as a goodbye disguised as a final bow. So when Jack entered the Australian jungle for I'm a Celebrity, the world expected entertainment. What they didn't expect was the emotional unraveling of a son still grieving the biggest loss of his life. It began subtly. A few tears during conversations, long pauses before answering questions about home, the way he'd suddenly fall silent when other campmates talked about their fathers. And then came the painful moment that pushed him closer to breaking. He was the only campmate who didn't receive a letter from home during the group challenge. As envelope after envelope was opened, full of messages of encouragement, pride, love, Jack clapped for others, smiled and nodded, trying desperately not to let the disappointment show. But viewers saw his face fall, his eyes glassed over. His bravery cracked. Fans took to social media in outrage, calling the decision heartless, cruel, and unfair, especially given the year Jack had endured. Even his sister Kelly, watching from home, wrote that she was so sad for him and wished she could hug her brother. The entire country felt protective of him in a way few reality stars ever experience. Jack wasn't just another contestant. He was a grieving son trying to stay afloat. The following day, however, everything changed. The camp finally won the Second Chance Challenge, unlocking Jack's long-delayed letter from home, and it shattered him in the most human way possible. When one of his campmates read aloud the message from his wife, Eri, Jack immediately bowed his head, blinking rapidly, fighting back tears. In the letter, Eri told him how proud she was of him, how strong he'd been, how his children were watching and cheering for him every single day. She reminded him that his late father would have been proud too, a sentence that hit him so hard, he visibly shook. He held onto the side of the shelter for balance, breathing deep, as the jungle momentarily disappeared and all he could feel was the love waiting for him at home. But it was nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to what happened days later when the producers revealed the one thing every contestant secretly hopes for: a family reunion. Jack had no idea what was coming. He was standing near the camp entrance, talking quietly with another contestant, still wearing the camp clothes that had grown rough and faded from weeks of trials. He looked smaller somehow, thinner, more tired, a man running purely on heart. And then from the opening in the vines, he saw her, his wife, holding their daughter's hand. The moment his brain registered what his eyes were seeing, something inside him just collapsed. He covered his mouth, his body shook, his knees bent as if they might give way. His daughter ran to him first, throwing her arms around him with the pure, unfiltered love only a child can express. Jack grabbed her, not delicately, not cautiously, but with that desperate, overwhelming relief of a parent who has been missing a piece of themselves. He buried his face in her hair and sobbed into her shoulder. Then he reached for his wife. Ari wrapped her arms around him, whispering something only he could hear, and Jack cried harder, the kind of deep, shaking sobs that come from the core, the type that say, "I've been strong for too long." The other contestants stood back, some tearing up themselves, giving the family space to reconnect. It wasn't a made-for-TV moment. It wasn't dramatic or staged. It felt real, painfully, beautifully real. Because after weeks without human comfort, without family, without the familiar feeling of being held, Jack finally felt safe enough to stop pretending he was okay. He walked away for a moment, wiping his face, trying to gather himself. But his daughter looked at him with wide, innocent eyes, and he broke again, choking out, "I missed you so much." At home, viewers watching live cried with him. Social media lit up. The moment went viral within minutes. Many wrote that it was the most genuine scene in I'm a Celebrity history, not because it was dramatic, but because it was vulnerable, honest, human. It was the kind of moment that reminds everyone why the show works. Strip away fame, strip away glamour, strip away comfort, and what remains is the raw truth of who people are. Jack spent the rest of the day walking around camp with his daughter on his hip and his wife by his side. He showed them the shelter where he slept, the fire pit where he cried over his dad, the trees where he'd sat staring into the distance, thinking about life, fatherhood, grief, and healing. He laughed more in those few hours than he had in weeks. He looked lighter, softer, younger even. Grief had aged him in quiet ways, added lines to his expression, tension to his shoulders. Seeing his family seemed to peel that weight off layer by layer. His wife kissed him on the forehead several times. His daughter held his face in her tiny hands as if to remind him she was real and here, and he wasn't alone anymore. Later, when it was time for his family to leave, the goodbye was emotional but steadier. He hugged them tightly, whispered promises, and then watched them disappear back through the path they came. He didn't crumble this time. Instead, he wiped his face, exhaled deeply, and said to his campmates, "I needed that more than I can explain." And everyone understood. Even the viewers at home understood, because for the first time since Ozzy's death, Jack looked like he was going to be okay. The reunion became the emotional centerpiece of the season. Newspapers covered it, fans rewatched it, psychologists even commented on how meaningful it can be for someone navigating grief to receive love and physical connection after prolonged emotional strain. For Jack, the jungle had become a strange kind of therapy, forcing him to sit with his feelings, confront his pain, and express emotions he'd spent years learning to suppress. Growing up in the Osbourne household meant surviving chaos with humor. Crying wasn't the family's way. They joked through everything. They laughed at what hurt. But now, without Ozzy's presence shaping their world, Jack realized he needed new tools to survive life without the man who had been his anchor. The public response was overwhelmingly compassionate. Viewers praised him for his vulnerability, Men in particular wrote messages saying Jack made them feel seen, that he gave them permission to grieve openly. Parents wrote that his connection with his daughter reminded them of their own families. And some wrote that watching him cry for his father made them cry for people they had lost years earlier. It was powerful, the kind of collective emotional experience that rarely happens on modern television. By the time the season approached its finale, Jack had emerged as one of the most beloved contestants, not because he won every trial or because he was the funniest or loudest personality, but because he was sincere, humble, real. In a world where reality TV often rewards exaggeration and drama, Jack did the opposite. He showed heartbreak. He showed love. He showed how painful and precious family can be after loss. He showed growth. And more importantly, he showed that healing is possible, even in the most unlikely places. When Jack eventually left the jungle for good and returned to the outside world, photographers captured him at the airport, hugging his children again,